One day, my stepmom said something that broke me completely. I never thought a single sentence could change how I saw someone forever.
But that day it did.
I was just coming home from school, tired and ready to relax, when my stepmom called me into the kitchen. She had that usual calm look on her face, the kind that hides everything she's really feeling. I didn't think much of it until she opened her mouth and said something I still can't forget. Something that hit me so hard, it felt like the floor had disappeared from under me. My name's Maya, and for most of my teenage life, I've lived with my dad and stepmom after my mom passed away. Things were never perfect, but I always tried to be understanding, to keep the peace. She wasn't cruel, just distant. Like, she was always trying to keep a certain space between us. I told myself it was just part of blending families, that eventually we'd find our rhythm. But deep down, I always hoped for something more. Maybe even love. Or at least kindness. That afternoon, though, everything shifted. Her words didn't just sting, they opened a wound I didn't even know I had. And in that moment, I saw everything differently. The smiles, the quiet dinners, the moments I thought were real, they all started to feel like a lie. I wanted to scream, to cry, to ask why. But all I could do was stand there, frozen, trying to make sense of what just happened. What exactly did she say that left me so broken? What truth came out that day? Something I wasn't supposed to hear. What happened next changed more than just how I saw her. It changed everything. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at her, trying to convince myself I had heard it wrong. That maybe I misunderstood. But no, her face said everything. Cold. Emotionless. Like she had just dropped something casual, not something that would echo in my head for days. My heart was racing, but my body refused to move. I kept thinking, why now? Why say this? And what did it really mean? To explain what happened, I guess I need to go back a bit. After my mom passed away when I was 11, everything changed. My dad tried to stay strong for me, but grief has a strange way of changing people. A year later, he met Lily, my stepmom. At first, she seemed sweet, quiet, polite, always helpful. But there was this wall between us from the beginning. I don't know if it was me, or if she just never wanted that mom role. Either way, I always felt like a guest in my own home. Still, I tried. I tried on her birthdays, on holidays, on regular days when I'd ask if she wanted help with dinner, or just talk about school. She'd smile and nod but never really see me. My dad said she was just adjusting. That we both were. So I waited. For years. For something to shift. But nothing did. That day, in the kitchen, I wasn't expecting a heart-to-heart. I had just gotten home, and she was wiping the counter like everything was normal. Then she turned to me and said it, so casually, almost like she didn't even realize how much it would hurt. I only stayed because of your dad. Not for you. That sentence hit like a punch to the chest. Not for me. Not even because of me. It was like all the pretending, all the little bits of effort I had been clinging to meant nothing to her. I wanted to ask what I had done wrong. Had I made her life harder? Had I been too hopeful? But my voice wouldn't come out. She went right back to wiping the counter, like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just shattered something inside me. I turned away before she could see the tears in my eyes. I didn't want to give her that. But inside, something cracked wide open. And that's when I started to question everything. Was she hiding more? Was there something else I didn't know? That night, I barely slept. Her words kept replaying in my head, over and over. Not for you. It was like a whisper that wouldn't stop, growing louder every time I closed my eyes. I kept thinking, was it always like this? Had she been pretending the whole time? And if she didn't care about me, then why even try to act like she did? The next morning at breakfast, everything felt fake. My dad sat across from me, reading the news on his phone like usual. Lily poured him coffee and smiled like nothing was wrong. I looked at her, wondering how she could act so normal. Was she always this good at hiding how she really felt? I thought about telling my dad. About everything. But what would I even say? Hey, Lily told me she only stayed with you and never cared about me. It sounded childish, even in my head. And what if he didn't believe me? What if he took her side? That was the part that scared me most. Losing him too. So I stayed quiet. But the silence started growing between us. Not just between me and Lily, but between me and my dad. I started noticing things I hadn't before. How he would glance at her a little too quickly when I talked. How she'd answer questions for him sometimes, as if she already knew what he'd say. I couldn't tell if it had always been that way, or if I was just starting to see it now. Then something strange happened a few days later. I came home early from school, because a class got canceled. The house was quiet, and I was about to head to my room when I heard voices from the office downstairs. I couldn't make out every word, but I heard my name. And then Lily said something like, "She's not your responsibility anymore." I froze. What did she mean? Why would she say that? I didn't want to listen, but I couldn't help it. I waited, hoping to hear more, but the door shut and everything went quiet again. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding. That sentence felt even worse than the one in the kitchen. Not your responsibility anymore. Like I was some task to be checked off. Something wasn't right. Something deeper. And I had a feeling this was just the beginning. After that day, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lily said behind that office door. I kept replaying the words in my mind, looking for hidden meaning. She's not your responsibility anymore. What did that even mean? Was she talking about me moving out? Were they planning something without telling me? My chest felt tight all the time, like I was waiting for something bad to happen and didn't know when it would hit. I started watching everything more closely. I noticed how quiet my dad had become lately. He wasn't laughing at my jokes the way he used to. He'd come home, eat dinner, then disappear into the office with Lily, and I'd be left alone at the table, picking at my food and pretending I was fine. There was this distance between us that didn't used to be there. And every time I tried to bring up something real, he'd either brush it off or change the subject. Like he didn't want to deal with it. I started wondering, was he keeping secrets too? One night, I decided to look, not because I wanted to spy, but because I needed answers. I waited until they were asleep, and then I quietly went into the office. My hands were shaking as I opened the desk drawer. I didn't know what I was even looking for, just something, anything to help me understand what was happening. And that's when I found it. A folder. My name written on the tab in Lily's handwriting. Inside were papers. Letters. Printouts. Some were from years ago, some more recent. I couldn't understand everything, but what stood out were the words custody, guardianship, and a bunch of legal stuff I didn't fully get. But what hit me hardest was a letter from my biological mom. One I had never seen before. It was dated just a few months before she passed. She had written it to my dad, asking him to promise that no matter what happened, he'd make sure I felt loved, safe, and that I'd never feel like a burden. My hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped the paper. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Why was this hidden? Why had I never been told? And then I heard footsteps. I quickly stuffed the papers back in, closed the drawer, and slipped out of the office, heart pounding. I barely made it to my room before I heard the door creak open downstairs. Lily's voice floated up the hallway.
"Come."
"Did you hear something?" My dad mumbled something back. I couldn't make out the words, but they were getting closer. I sat in the dark, clutching the edge of my bed, trying to stay quiet. I knew then that something bigger was going on. Something they didn't want me to know. Maybe it had nothing to do with love, or maybe it had everything to do with it. But whatever it was all coming to the surface.
Fast.
And I wasn't sure I was ready for what I'd find next. The next morning, I acted like nothing happened. I didn't sleep much, but I forced myself to go through the motions, brushing my hair, packing my bag, sitting down at the table like it was just another regular school day. My dad gave me a distracted good morning, and Lily barely even looked at me. I couldn't stop wondering if they knew I had been in the office.
If they could sense the shift in me.
But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was pretending I didn't feel completely betrayed. That letter from my mom kept flashing in my mind like a warning. She had trusted him. She believed he'd keep her promise. But something about the way things were now, it didn't feel like a promise kept. It felt like a cover-up. And I was stuck in the middle of it, not knowing who to trust anymore. Later that evening, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. We didn't talk often, mostly on birthdays or holidays. But this time, her voice sounded different. Nervous. Almost like she was holding something back. I was just thinking about you, she said, hesitating. Are you okay? I paused. Yeah, why? There was a long silence on the other end before she finally said, I saw something today. A notice. Legal stuff. It had your name on it. My stomach dropped. What kind of notice? It looked like some kind of guardianship transfer, she said slowly. Like your dad is giving full legal responsibility to Lily. I froze. Wait, what? She lowered her voice, like she wasn't even sure she should be telling me. I don't know the details, but I thought you should know. It's unusual for someone your age. I mean, you're not a child anymore. Why now? I had no words. My mind was racing. My dad, giving her full responsibility? Behind my back? Why would he do that? Especially when I was only a year away from turning 18. It didn't make any sense. Unless this was planned. Unless that's what Lily meant when she said, she's not your responsibility anymore. Suddenly, everything felt connected. The silence. The distance. The secrets. And now this. I couldn't sit still. I had to confront him. But before I could even get up, I heard raised voices downstairs. Not yelling, but sharp. Tense. I crept to the hallway and listened. I told you not to leave those papers out, Lily whispered harshly. What if she saw them? She didn't, my dad replied, though he didn't sound sure. And even if she did, it's too late now. Too late? That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about custody. It wasn't just about legal forms. Something else was going on, something much deeper. And whatever it was, they had no intention of telling me. Not until it was already done. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. I walked downstairs, heart pounding, and stepped into the room. My dad and Lily froze mid-conversation. The air felt heavy, like all the lies were hanging between us, waiting to be dragged into the light. I looked at both of them and said, I saw the papers. I know what you're doing. My dad's face paled. Lily didn't say a word. For a second, no one moved. Then he sighed and sat down like the weight of it all had finally caught up with him. I was going to tell you, he said quietly. We were just waiting for the right time. The right time? I asked, my voice shaking. You're signing over guardianship to someone who said she never stayed for me. You were going to hand me over like some obligation you didn't want anymore. He looked at me, eyes tired. It's not like that. Then what is it like? That's when Lily finally spoke. Your dad's been sick. For a while now. My heart stopped. What? He didn't want to worry you, she said, arms crossed but her voice more careful now. But things are getting worse. He thought if something happened to him, I'd need to be your legal guardian. I stared at him, waiting for him to deny it. But he didn't. Instead, he nodded slowly. I didn't want to scare you, he whispered. But I wanted to make sure you were taken care of. I didn't know what to say. The anger inside me turned into something else. Confusion, fear, maybe even guilt. I felt like I'd been swimming in lies, but maybe some of them were told out of love. Still, that didn't explain everything. Then came the final twist. Lily glanced at my dad, then at me. You should know your mom didn't just leave behind that letter. She left something else too. Something we kept from you. She walked to the cabinet, pulled out a small box, and placed it in my hands. Inside was a second letter, addressed to me, from my mom. I held it, unsure whether to open it or run away. Everything I thought I knew was unraveling. But now, finally, I was holding the truth. Or, at least, the beginning of it. My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. The paper inside was soft and a little faded, but the handwriting was unmistakably hers, my mom's. I took a deep breath and started reading. Her words were warm, gentle, like a hug I hadn't felt in years. She told me how proud she was of me, how much she wished she could be there for my first heartbreak, my graduation, all the little moments. And then she said something I never expected. She wrote, if something happens to me, I hope you'll let yourself love again, even the people who come into your life after me. They won't replace me, and they're not meant to. But you still deserve love, even if it looks different. I couldn't hold back the tears anymore. All the anger, the confusion, it didn't vanish, but something inside me softened. I looked up at Lily, who was watching me carefully, almost unsure of her place. For the first time, I didn't see her as the enemy, just someone caught in the middle of something hard. Later that night, my dad and I sat outside on the porch. He told me everything about his illness, the treatments he had been quietly going through, and why he thought signing over guardianship would give me stability. He said he never meant to shut me out.
He was just scared.
Scared of letting me down, of not being strong enough. I told him the truth, too, that I felt abandoned, that Lily's words had hurt me in ways I couldn't explain. But I also told him about the letter, about how Mom's voice somehow brought me back to a place where things made sense again. Lily never apologized for what she said in the kitchen. Maybe she didn't know how. But something changed between us after that. She started showing up in small ways, asking how school was, making my favorite meals, even just sitting beside me in silence. It wasn't perfect, and maybe it never would be. But it was something. I won't pretend everything tied up neatly. Life doesn't really work like that. But I found peace in the truth, and in finally being seen. And now, every time I feel lost, I go back to that letter. My mom's words remind me that even in brokenness, love can still find its way through. Sometimes, healing starts with just being brave enough to read the truth.